So rugby strength and conditioning has a bit of a paradox to it. On one hand, for you to do it and execute consistently and get the most benefit out of it, particularly if you do not have a coach working with you, it needs to be simple. But on the other hand, the complexity of rugby and all of the different things that we're trying to achieve means that beneath the hood, there does need to be a lot going on and a lot of different things for you to consider. So today, what I'll be doing is critiquing a real rugby program that was sent in to me by a listener, and I'll show you some of the thoughts that I have behind it, things that I would adjust to actually make it really useful and effective for a player on the pitch. So of course, as an amateur rugby player, the most important thing is to see improvement on the pitch. Sometimes you'll see numbers go up in the gym, but that doesn't equate to on-field performance improving. Sometimes your numbers aren't really going anywhere within the gym, but because you're getting real quality work in, your on-field performance does feel a lot better. So there is a lot that is going on under the hood, and I'm going to get into that in this episode. If you're new here, hi, my name is TJ. I am the guy behind Rugby Muscle. Rugby Muscle is dedicated to reshaping the way that amateur rugby players think about their S&C. And so this is a perfect opportunity for us to do that. If you enjoy this video, give the video a thumbs up. Be sure to hit subscribe on Spotify, rate the podcast if you really enjoy it. All that stuff really does help out a lot, and it helps me know what I should keep doing. I'm enjoying the momentum that we're building here in 2025. So we'll get into this training program in a second. Let me pull it up. But first, let me reiterate. Rugby does need programming that is simple to run, especially if you're not training in person with a coach. The more complex it is, the more likely you are just to sack it off, the more overwhelming it is to get going. But at the same time, we do need a level of complexity in order to get the adaptations that we need that are going to make you a better rugby player. And most rugby players either undercook it and have their training just be way too basic. That is still going to get some level of results that you see on the pitch, but for the time investment, there are lots of things that you can do better. The other thing that a lot of people do is they overcook it. They make their training way too complex, and then they mess up one session and that messes up everything else, and again they get their momentum killed real quickly. An even bigger one I just thought of is that they copy just programs that they see online, or they take pieces of what they see online and then they end up sort of making their own Frankenstein program from bits and pieces that they've seen online and hoping that that will work for them. This is very much like if you were to look at the blueprints of a helicopter and then draw your own helicopter from that. What you then draw looks very similar to the blueprint, but it does not mean that anyone can look at that drawing of yours and produce a helicopter that can fly efficiently. That is an analogy I use in the Rugby Muscle Blueprint. If you want to know more about how you can sort of construct your own program and everything that you need to consider as a rugby athlete, I'll put the link to the all-new 5-day Rugby Athlete Blueprint in the description below. What you must understand about your program, the most important part is the intent, the progression, the practicality, how we put all of this together. It's not the moves, it's not the reps, it's what is going on behind that. So let's pull up this program. What I'll do is I will get the editor to put it here, and you'll see the program itself, and then we'll break down day by day what's going on. So firstly, we're looking at the warm-ups here. The warm-ups look pretty good. I don't really have too much of a problem with it. I just don't like the idea of having warm-ups be specific things that you have to do. I like the idea of just going on and getting onto either a rowing machine or a bike or whatever. We're just getting the heart rate going for about 2 to 5 minutes, and that's usually enough. And then you can do some warm-up reps or warm-up sets within your first working movement. On this one, it would be squats, and then we get into it. If it's really important, it should just be part of the program. It shouldn't be treated as a warm-up. Most people will just sort of phone in their warm-ups. I find that it will be skipped if time is short. If it's useful, it should be part of the main session. I like the medicine ball rotational throw here. I think that's a really good movement to have in, particularly because most rugby players, or most programs in general for everyone in the gym, consists of mostly lifting up and down. They're just only working in this vertical plane. When we're athletes, when we're thinking about what we want to put in on the pitch, we need to move in different directions. We need to train some level of that. Yes, most of our stuff is going to be up and down because that's just the way that we're going to train with the weights in order to put the stress on the muscles and get the adaptations that we want. But we should still learn to move as athletes around us in space. So that rotational medicine ball throw here, 3 times 5 per side, a really good movement to use. I would just put it in the main program. Like, why not? And then we'll get into the meat of the program, the main workout. We've got squats here, 3x5 into broad jumps, 3x3. Again, broad jump, really solid. Squats, really solid. Broad jump, particularly solid because we're moving again. We're not just jumping up and down, we're moving forward now, and we're hitting again another sort of horizontal based movement where we're trying to move through space. The only thing I don't like about this, and it's going to be a main feature of the program, and I'll probably address it at the end, is the fact that we've just got 3x5 reps. So what are we doing week to week? If that's 3x5 reps on week 1, are we trying to add weight every single week? What happens if we stop adding weight? There's going to be a point here where we get limited by what we can do, because we can't just continually add weight to the bar. So do we switch intention? Do we switch the movements? Do we lower the reps to accommodate that? How are we progressing from week to week? And that's a big thing that must be considered, way more than sets and reps, way more than exercises, because the exercise selection here is not bad at all. We've got bench press 3x8, RDL 3x8 to 10, lat pull down 3x10, Pallof press 3x8, rear delt flies 3x8, and then Zottman curls into overhead extensions and tricep kickbacks 3x8 to 10. This is not a bad base of movements. We've got vertical pulling, we've got hinging, we've got horizontal pushing. So we've got upper body pushing and pulling. We've got a little bit of arm work in there. We've got a little bit of rear delt work in there, which is good to address common shoulder issues that rugby players will have. I think there's decent thought that's gone into this, where we've got a good balance of movements to hit most of the body. The main problem I have with this session in general is going to be the rep ranges. We just need to understand how we're going to progress week to week. 3x8 can work for 1 week. It might even work for the second week if you've added weight for that. But then what happens if you then progress even more? So maybe we're going for the rear delt flyers that we've got 3x8 reps with. We go with 10 kilos week 1. We go with 12.5 kilos week 2. We're able to do 3x8 on both of those. Now we've gone from 10 to 15 within 2 weeks. It's either going to be tough on week 3 or it's have been way too easy on week 1. So we need an idea of what our intent is, how close we should be to failure. We should either be using RPE, so your rating of perceived exertion, or your RIR, your reps in reserve, how many reps you could have done after you finish that set. These things are going to give you a better indication of the intent behind the movement and then how you're able to progress. So we can either use a rep range, which is done twice here with the arms and the RDLs, where we've got 8 to 10 reps, which means that we can progress the weight, but we can still drop reps and fall within the given rep range to keep the intent the same and keep progressing. Or we can have the same, exact same sets and reps, but week to week, we're hoping that RPE goes down, because then we've improved. And then we can add weight once we get to maybe RPE 7.5, and then we can start to add weight. What I normally do is the rep ranges, and then we're trying to indicate how hard, how close we want to push to failure. But overall, it's not bad. I just would like to see more intent behind what we're trying to achieve here. The other easy win I would look to get from this session is potentially condensing the training by utilizing either supersets or paired sets, so we can combine the lifts. So for example, when we've got bench press and RDL, we could, if we have enough space within the gym, we could do those two as a superset. And maybe we don't go directly from the bench press to the RDL. Maybe we just go bench press, rest a minute, go to the RDL, rest a minute, go back to the bench press. That way we've gotten more than 2.5 minutes rest from our bench press to recover our pushing muscles, but we're still getting through a lot of work within that time. This, of course, requires you to be fit, which then perfectly transitions me into talking about the cardio finisher that we've got here. I'll talk more about the conditioning side of things a little bit later, but just know that this is an absolute classic S&C program mistake that rugby players make. Conditioning is just an afterthought that appears to be tacked on the end of a weight-based program, and that's because, you know, most of our weight room work is just stolen, copied, or inspired from powerlifting, bodybuilding, weight room based sports, whatever you choose to be, or even just like physique goals, right? So the conditioning, we think, oh, we need to be fit for rugby, also let's tack on some intervals at the end. We'll talk more about that in a little bit, but just understand that this is not how I would approach the conditioning. And then we look at the session itself. It's assault bike, 30 seconds at a moderate to high effort, then 30 seconds easy for 8 to 12 rounds. I do not like this conditioning session at all. 30 seconds moderate to high is just not something that is ever done within rugby. It's going to be too higher intensity to work the aerobic system, plus repeat for 8 to 12 rounds. That's 8 to 12 minutes of work. Not enough time to really make much of a dent in our aerobic system or our aerobic capacity to improve it. And if we're not working the aerobic system, which fuels everything that's going on during an 80-minute rugby match, we want to be working that real high-end power. We want to enhance our body's ability to produce a lot of force, a lot of energy in a real short period of time. That's going to prepare us for our big actions that we undertake in rugby. Big actions in rugby never last for 30 seconds at a moderate to high intensity. You're either going all in or you're recovering. And so what we're doing here within 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off is a bit of nothing, or a lot of nothing. 8 to 12 minutes of not really much. We're going to get a lot of fatigue from this session, but we're not going to get too much out of it. Yes, it's going to give you some level of improvement because we're doing like something, but the middle ground really is something that I stay away from for most rugby players because it doesn't help us improve our rugby performance. We could either drop this completely or we could stick to 8 to 12 minutes of work, but what we would do is short, intense 6 to 10 seconds of max out work, followed by 1 to 2 minutes of recovery, and repeating that process over and over and over again. And that works really well on the assault bike. So if that's what's here, that's what's available for you, use it. You could also do this doing burpees. You could do hill sprints. Those are probably the best options, the most available options. Rowing machine sometimes is a little bit too difficult to get to that real higher level intensity. What we're trying to do is teach the body to utilize a real large amount of energy and produce so much power in a short period of time so that we can do so on the rugby pitch. That's our main goal with condition, outside of developing a really robust aerobic system, which is just not going to be done within 8 to 12 minute sessions. And so that is day one. Let's move on to day two and day three because they seem to share a lot of similar stuff. So for example, I can see already that the conditioning is the same on all three sessions. So the same logic will apply to those. The warm-up is very similar. Same stuff applies again. I really like the rotational medicine ball throw. I also really like the burpees into box jumps. That is a great movement. 5 reps might be a little bit too high because by the 5th rep, we're going to sort of slow down and not utilize as much power. But I love burpee to box jumps for maybe 2 to 3 reps where you're just producing as much force as you can, getting up onto your feet and jumping. And that's going to really make it easier for you when you're getting up and down on a rugby pitch, have that explosion to get up and do it again and again and again. Remember, when you're doing it on a rugby pitch, you're not doing it for fight, you're just getting up. And if you can get up efficiently one time, that's enough. And then you get into the defensive line or you get back into your attacking line and keep going. For day two, we've got deadlift 3 times 5, power clean 3 times 5, dead stop rows 3 times 6, shoulder press 3 times 8, incline bench 3 times 8, seated row 3 times 8, and then Zottman curl into overhead tricep extension 3 times 8. First thing I'd address here is I would switch around the power cleans and the deadlifts. In general, a rule of thumb that you can occasionally break, but what we like to do is to start with our fastest movements and then move into heavy movements and then move into like the higher rep movements. So if we go from fast to heavy, we're going to start with our power clean. That way we've got all of our energy available to us. We're not experiencing any fatigue that's going to inhibit the force and the speed that we need to reach in order to properly execute the power cleans. Then we can go into our deadlifts. Because of the explosive nature of the power cleans, we're not really fatigued going into the deadlifts. Like the power clean isn't overly fatiguing, but the deadlifts absolutely are. So you're going into that still relatively fresh, it primed potentially, if you will, if you're doing an explosive movement before. And then we've got the rest of our session. 5 reps might be a bit high on the power clean, particularly if we're really trying to get the intent there. Again, I'd look to 1 to 3 repetitions on that and keep it nice and explosive. And then maybe the same for deadlifts. Depends where you are and how efficient you are. But I think deadlifts in general are really high fatiguing movement, and they're not ideal to repeat, particularly for 5 reps week to week to week for rugby athletes that have got a lot of work to get through. And obviously it depends on the focus. Deadlifts can work really well to tick a box in several different areas. But if you've got the time, as these sessions suggest that you have, I'll probably drop them and just focus on the RDLs, the squats, and build our posterior chain with that stuff anyway. And then again, similar stuff to day one's critique. It doesn't seem like it's overly bad. There's lots of good movement variety here. I probably question why we're doing dead stop rows and seated rows within the same session. We'd either spread that out or drop one of those completely, or maybe switch out one of them for a vertical pull-in movement so that we're hitting something a little bit different. They're just a bit too similar for what we're going here for 3 full body sessions. Overall, not bad. Same critique as I've got for the rep ranges, same critique as I've got for the cardio finisher. And then we move on to session 3. Same critique for the warm-up. The only thing I would say for this, I've just noticed, is 3 sets of 1-minute plank holds. I would probably drop those plank holds down to 20 to 30 seconds at most and increase the difficulty of that movement. Planks for a minute seems like a good idea. It seems like what everyone else does, but I like to build a real strong core to help you, drive through tackles, to make tackles, to win collisions, to win contact situations, which is what you want a real strong core to do. You don't do that by holding a position for over a minute. You do that by exerting a lot of force through your torso. So you can do long lever planks, you could do weighted planks, you could even do something that I also see that is missing here, some level of movement-based ab work. So whether that's leg raises or whether that's heavy crunches, something like that, something where you're moving your torso through space in order to get that core really working. I love using that sort of stuff. Even side bends, lateral planks where we're moving up and down. But again, we want to really challenge the same level of strength as we are with the rest of our movements, where we're not working for a minute, we're working for 20 to 30 seconds, maybe even less time, and we're really trying to exert the force through our torso. Then we've got the main session, 3 times 5 on squats, 3 times 8 on power cleans, RDLs 3 times 5, dead stop rows 3 times 6, bench press 3 times 5 to 6, Palloff press 3 times 8, shoulder press 3 times 6, lat pull down 3 times 10, and then rear delt fly 3 times 8. Got a bit of heavier movement on this, and this being session 3 suggests that this is the end of the week. I would do my heavier work at the beginning of the week because it requires the most amount of force for you to do. So you'd rather do that stuff nice and fresh at the beginning of the week, and then you can go into your higher rep work with a little bit of fatigue and it's not going to massively affect it. So I'd rather have my lower reps, my heavier work at the beginning of the week if we're going to do things that way, or at least at the beginning of the session as we've got throughout this program. Same sort of concept. We want to be minimally fatigued going into fast work, going into heavy work, but for the higher rep work where we're going for 8 to 12 reps, having a little bit of fatigue isn't going to make a huge effect. So as I'm going through this program, I'm also seeing a somewhat of a lack of heavy upper body movement. So we've got bench press 3 times 5 to 6 reps and dead stop row 3 times 6. That's the heaviest that we go within the upper body. I'd like to see something like a 3 to 5 rep range for the bench press, maybe even for the rows, or what I like to use is heavy pull-ups so that you're getting a good range of motion and you don't have to question whether you're cheating. Like with the rows, a lot of the time, even with dead stop rows, you can still end up utilizing your lower body, trying to get a bit of a sway into that to help the weight go up, and then you're not sure whether you're getting stronger because your back muscles are getting stronger or because you're utilizing a bit more of a swing to pull that weight into your belly. So yeah, I like heavy pull-ups. I'd like some more heavier upper body work within this. The final thing that I see here that I do not like, I really don't like this actually, is the 3 times 8 reps on the power clean. That's not going to give you a power benefit because it's too high a rep range, which means we're going to slow down as we get to 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 reps, and then we're not getting the power benefit that we could have done. I'd much rather flip down its head, do 8 times 3 power cleans. You could do in the same amount of reps, you could do a heavier weight, you could even do the same weight, but you're going to get much more of a benefit as power, speed, all of that sort of stuff. And on a technically demanding lift like the power clean, 8 reps is really asking a lot, especially if you want to get the benefit out of it. So I immediately switched that. I don't think that that's really going to cause injury. I'm going to nitpick there. I don't like people saying that programs are going to injure you. You're a rugby player. You should be able to execute whatever you're given in the gym and not have a fear for it hurting you, as long as you understand the intent behind it. And looking through this program, the movement variety again is solid. We've got most movement patterns covered. We don't have a lot of single leg work. We don't have a lot of any isolateral or unilateral work at all, which is something I definitely would look to add in, particularly as we've got lots of repeated movements within the week. I think we would be better off served splitting up that stuff and making sure that if we're repeating a movement, we would then repeat that as a unilateral or an isolateral movement. So for example, instead of doing squats twice within the week, we would do one day of squats and then the other day would be a split squat of some sort. And that way at least we know that we've got both sides covered and we're not doing everything just bilaterally, because obviously on the pitch we're not performing most stuff bilaterally. We're very unilateral. We're using our limbs on their own as we're running around and doing whatever we can on the pitch. Overall though, the movement variety is solid, a little bit generic for my liking, but that's what you're going to get with a program like this. But the biggest issues that I have with this program are not within the individual exercise selections or the rep ranges, any of that stuff, or not even the order. It's more to do with the program as a whole. And this is an issue that I have with a lot of programs that I see online, or the way people treat their S&C. It's the program as a whole should be way more than the sum of its parts, and this program is actually less than the sum of its parts, right? Because looking at here, we have no clear progression model. We don't know if it's working week to week. We don't know how we're supposed to progress week to week. We don't know how this is supposed to translate and manifest into improvements on the pitch week to week. We just don't know. This is just a general template that we're then supposed to get something out of, and it just doesn't work. The other thing is that I've been sent this program. Is this a good program for rugby players? Without any context, no, right? Because of what I've said before, but we need context to know if this program is going to be good. The athlete's goals, their position, how they want to play, their available time, their life demands, all that sort of stuff needs to be considered when we want to make improvements as a rugby player, because otherwise you end up with this sort of generic program that can benefit, but could do with so many things that would give you an infinitely more productive training cycle of 3 to 6 months that you will then really see the benefit on the pitch and potentially revolutionize yourself as a player. And then the final thing that I think is massively missing with this program and most S&C programs that I see built for rugby players is assuming that S&C is just weight room work. It's not. It's strength and conditioning. If you've got 3 sessions to dedicate to your strength and conditioning, one of those at minimum should be dedicated to your conditioning. Your conditioning is going to make a huge difference, not just to how you perform on the rugby pitch, but also if you get your aerobic system really up to scratch, you're going to experience those benefits in the weight room themselves as well, because you're going to get through a lot more work because your ability to recover is better. And that is something that is missed not just in the rugby community, but potentially in the strength and conditioning community as a whole. Because a lot of strength and conditioning coaches get into strength and conditioning because they're really good at weights. And then they want to show other athletes how they can utilize weights. Conditioning side of things is massive, particularly for a sport like rugby where you have to perform over and over and over again for an 80-minute period. Take a sumo wrestler. That person is infinitely strong, but they are built for the demand of their sport, which is a sport that could last 2 seconds or 1 minute at most. They don't need a robust aerobic system, so all of their strength and conditioning work, as it will, goes towards their size, packing on as much strength, as much power, everything like that to push their opponent out of the arena. When looking at rugby, you have to perform for 80 minutes. That is part of the game. That's the minimum part that you've signed up for. That sumo wrestler is going to suck for a game of rugby, but a marathon runner at least is going to be able to perform for the whole game. His ceiling might not be that high for how powerful a carry he can make, but you know he's still going to be there performing as best he can at minute 80. And what we want as rugby players is a blend of those two things. We want to be powerful and explosive, but we must have a strong, robust aerobic system, and that should have its priority within your program. So having 3 sessions and having them all weights based is missing a huge trick as far as I'm concerned. You should absolutely do one of those sessions, just maybe a zone 2 aerobic session, particularly if your resting heart rate is above 50. There's lots of room for you to improve just by getting a more robust aerobic system, and you will notice the difference on the pitch way more than a 3rd session of weights will give you. You're already getting 2 weight sessions, so you're already bringing about good strength, power, adaptations. Why not make that 3rd session be completely aerobic conditioning based and have that infinitely improve, and then you will see that on the pitch. The other thing besides conditioning that needs to be touched on that is not even addressed within this program is speed and agility work. Again, even if you're already fast already, you want to stay sharp. If you're already slow, then obviously we need to build speed, and we need to do that by getting onto the pitch and doing sprinting. Power cleans and how many jumps have we got within this program? 1 day of jumps, 3 jumps, or burpees into broad jumps. So, okay, we've got like maybe 9 sets of jumps throughout this program. That is not going to be enough to improve your speed unless you're already really slow. We need to be getting some speed work within this program. And maybe this program is for someone in season. Maybe this is for someone that's doing their pre-season and they're doing sprints within their rugby training session. That is why we need context to build out an efficient rugby program for any rugby player, right? So without the context, I do not know whether this is a good program or a bad program. At best, it is like fairly decent, with lots of tweaks that could be made to make it way better. But it wasn't a terrible program, it just missed the mark in several key areas. The biggest lesson that I'm getting from this program and all of the programs that I see athletes create for themselves is the fact that just because you are taking what works from other programs and you're adding it into yours, it does not mean it's going to work for you. The intention is the most important thing. And once you've just copied something from a different program and put it into your own, it does not necessarily mean it's going to give you the right outcome. Instead, what you must do is start with what you want to build, what sort of rugby player you want to be, and then where are you now in relation to that, and then bridge that gap from where you are to where you want to be via the intention of a program, not via moves, not via certain sets and reps, but via the whole thing, via the program. What is going to get you there in 6 to 12 to 18 to 52 weeks time? What is going to get you to be the player that you want to be? This is a process that I teach within the 5-day Rugby Athlete Blueprint. Again, I will put the link in the description below. Or if this sounds like too much for you to fix on your own, this is what I do at Rugby Muscle. I've got links for the programs and for the coaching in the description below also. So check those out if you want to work together and build something that is finally worth your time. That brings us to the end of this episode. Hit thumbs up if you haven't done so already. Hit subscribe if you want to hear more from me. Leave a review on Spotify if this helped you out. We're climbing the ranks in the Spotify charts. I'm really enjoying that. Or whatever podcast service you use. 5 stars really does help us out. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll catch you in the next one.